The maniac of modern Russia operated in the second half of the noughties and is now serving a life sentence in the snowflake colony of the Khabarovsk territory, from which he recently sued 30,000 for the lack of hot water in the cell. So who is he, a lover of washing in comfort and a hunter of little girls? How was the Pervouralsky Strangler caught, and is it true that he took lives in order to escape from the monotony of existence? Nikolai was born in 1983 in Pervouralsk, in which he later committed his attacks. The family was complete. Father is a factory worker, mother is a cutter. After graduating from the 9th grade, Kolya went to vocational school to study as a locksmith, and later got a job at a local pipe factory. The guy had no personal life. Even after crossing the 18-year mark, he continued to live with his parents. Subsequently, in an interview, the maniac admits that in order to meet the needs, he periodically filmed girls of easy virtue. According to some reports, during childbirth, Nikolai received an injury related to the nervous system. Perhaps that is why, since adolescence, he began to demonstrate deviant behavior, steal, show aggression. He regularly visited a psychiatrist, was registered. Even as a teenager, Chigirinsky began to demonstrate a craving for causing pain, and not to anyone, namely girls younger than him. 13 years old, he first attacked a 10-year-old girl in an elevator and tried to abuse her and take her life, but apparently stopped in time. The first victim of the Ural monster was Anya Rogozin, who was only 8 at the time of the massacre. It happened in the year 2005, when the maniac was already 22 years old. When he saw a junior high school student going home after school, he persuaded her into a forest park, where he abused and strangled her.
Hey, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You have to subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss new videos.
After the massacre, he abused again, and then buried the body. Everything happened just a few meters from the pedestrian path, along which the summer residents were returning from suburban areas. Like any maniac, the Chigirinskys were drawn to the crime scene, and so a year later he returned to the grave, dug up the body and separated the head. His actions were later explained by the fact that the victim's soul was trapped in his head, which was looking for retribution and did not let him sleep. Taking the head in his hands, the maniac began to throw it over the trunks of trees in the hope of destroying the spirit of the deceased. After the disappearance, the girl was immediately put on the wanted list, and before the capture of the criminal, she was considered missing. And the maniac, feeling the pleasure of the first blood, went hunting again. 2 months later, Nikolai attacked Polina Baburina, who was only 7 at the time of the crime. The monster abused and strangled her with a shoelace, and took the victim's personal belongings away and set fire to them. And again, everything happened only a short distance from residential buildings. Therefore, do not think that maniacs operate only somewhere in remote and deserted places. No, monsters live in the middle of us, and we don't notice them or even suspect them. Paulina's body, unlike Anya's, was found immediately, the day after the massacre. It was influenced by the fact that the criminal did not store the body, but left it lying open. Perhaps he wanted to be found himself. After all, as you know, maniacs like to feel like celebrities. They love it when their crimes are talked about everywhere. No clues were found on the girl's body and her belongings. No semen, no fingerprints, no biological materials. The next time the riot happened almost a year later, on the 28th of May. Alyona Dobrodolina was 9. The girl was homely, obedient, her parents controlled her every step. It seemed that nothing terrible could happen to her. That day, Alyona asked her mother to visit her friend. Mom allowed it, staying in touch with her daughter. But suddenly the girl stopped answering calls. Ekaterina Dobrodolina became worried, took her husband, and together they went to comb the nearby yards. It was thanks to the prompt reaction of the parents that they managed to catch the beast. Everything happened unexpectedly. In search of their daughter, the Dobrodolins decided to look into an abandoned kindergarten located near their house. Going inside the basement of the old building, Igor, Alyona's father, immediately distinguished a male silhouette that was heading for the exit. The man asked the stranger if he had seen a little girl. "What kind of children can there be?" He grunted and went on. Igor looked around and saw his own daughter's things. He managed to shout to his wife, "Hold him." And he returned to the basement, where he found Elena's undressed, lifeless body. She died quite recently. The guys managed to detain. Moreover, he had a phone with him, deprived him of the girl's life. The locksmith of the local factory, Nikolai Chigirinskikh, turned out to be a maniac. Immediately after the arrest, the maniac confessed to the massacre of Natalinea, as well as 2 others. He told in detail how he deprived the girls of their lives, showed the burial place of the first victim, and not Rogozin. And as we remember, the girl was never found before his capture, so the involvement, we can say, was proven 100%. That, however, did not prevent the mother of the maniac from actively protecting her son, stressing his birth trauma and the fact that he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The same opinion was held by the monster's father. Apparently, it was easier for these people, simple hard workers. It's really hard to believe that the only son turned out to be such a monster. Nikolai himself later also decided that he had hurried with confessions and refused everything he had said earlier. As you may have noticed, maniacs often confess and then refuse. This is due to their communication with lawyers, who immediately recommend giving up all their words. The psychological and psychiatric examination, although it diagnosed Nikolai Chigirinskikh with mental disorders, generally recognized him as sane. He was, without a doubt, aware of his actions. And the public would not have forgiven if the maniac had been sent for treatment. The court sentenced the Pervouralsky Maniac to life imprisonment, and also awarded compensation to the families of the victims. Nikolai listened to the verdict completely without emotion. He didn't seem to care. Once he was just as indifferent to the ruined fate of the girls. They started talking about the Pervouralsky Strangler again relatively recently, in the 21st year, when he impressed everyone by being able to sue 30,000 rubles from the colony where he is serving a life sentence for the lack of hot water in the cell. Chigirinskikh himself, in a complaint about the violation of the conditions of detention, asked to recover 100,000 rubles from the colony. On the internet, you can find several interviews and direct monologues, confessions of the Pervouralsky monster. Judging by them, he began to take his life out of boredom and monotony of life. Nikolai didn't get along with the girls, his first love married another. He occasionally used the services of moths, sometimes changing them. I have never had a serious relationship with anyone. His life could be described in a few words: work, home, computer games, beer. Apparently, the reprisals brought some kind of drive, variety, and interest to this Groundhog Day. Therefore, having started, Chigirinskikh could not stop. Attacks were as necessary to him as air. It should be noted that I haven't seen anything and I don't know anything. Chigirinskikh still adheres to the line. Answering the correspondent's questions, he claims that he didn't know the girls, that he was forced to confess everything. However, how he knew the burial place of Anya Rogozin, which only a maniac could know, does not explain. Apparently, realizing that such coincidences simply do not happen. In addition, the biological material of Nikolai was found under the nails of the last victim, so the question of the guilt of the maniac is simply not worth it. Interestingly, Chigirinskikh is generally a fan of shaking his rights, probably also from boredom. For example, in the 2016 year, he made claims to the editorial office of the Pervouralsk City News. They say they called him a maniac in the publication, although such a characteristic did not appear in the verdict. Nikolai also considered that the mention of his surname casts a shadow on his relatives, and demanded an apology from the editorial board. The demands for an apology were set out by him in a letter to the editors and looked very funny and meticulous. At the request of the Strangler, the refutation should be published in the next issue, the circulation of which should have exceeded the circulation of the issue with the article that the maniac did not like. In addition, the offended criminal demanded $1.5 million in compensation. However, condescendingly signed, bargaining is appropriate. The investigators who communicated with Chigirinsky noted that he was quite smart, despite the climate of the criminal. Therefore, it is possible that a blind move to failure, part of the defense line thought out by him even before the trial, and he also clearly knows how to gain trust, which is why he was able to steal victims so easily. And then, already in prison, he continued to use his gift, so some correspondents who talked with Nikolai remained in full confidence that they were looking at a simple man who had suffered from police brutality. And the maniac continues his calculating game. From boredom, from what else? At the preliminary court hearings, the girl's relatives demanded that he be executed. The court ordered him to pay 500,000 rubles to the family of Paulina Baburina and 700,000 rubles to the family of Alyona Dobrodolina as compensation for moral damage. Anya Rogozin's grandmother refused compensation. After filing an appeal from lawyers, the Supreme Court of Russia upheld the verdict.